What do you get when you mix millionaire adrenaline junkies, rocket-powered boats, and a healthy disregard for safety? Offshore powerboat racing, a sport that once made NASCAR look like a tricycle race at a retirement home. So what happened? How did a sport that was once the crown jewel of coastal chaos go from champagne-soaked podiums to a historical footnote? Buckle up, because we're diving headfirst into the roaring, reckless, and ridiculously fast world of offshore powerboat racing, and why it all sank. Offshore powerboat racing has roots that stretch back more than a century. The very first recorded race, England to Calais in 1904. That's right, back when most people were still figuring out how to ride bicycles, a group of adventurous or possibly unhinged pioneers decided to race boats over long, unpredictable stretches of open sea. It was bold, it was dangerous, and it was the birth of something electric. And of course, Americans saw this and said, "Hold my beer." By the 1960s and 70s, the United States had embraced offshore powerboat racing with its signature flair: fast, loud, and larger than life. Nowhere was the sport more alive than in the sun-drenched harbors of Miami, Key West, and Fort Lauderdale. These weren't just races, they were events. Parties on the pier, helicopters overhead, beachgoers with binoculars. It felt like a rock concert on water, and the boats were the headliners. Celebrities and millionaires jumped in. Sometimes literally, offshore racing became the latest playground for the rich and the thrill-seeking. These weren't your average fishing boats. They looked like floating Lamborghinis, painted in bold colors, dripping with sponsors, and packing enough horsepower to scare a fighter jet. And then came Don Aronow, a name that would become synonymous with the golden age of offshore racing. He wasn't just a driver, he was a visionary. Don created iconic boat brands like Cigarette, Donzi, and Magnum. Sleek, aggressive, and terrifyingly fast, these boats didn't just dominate the ocean, they redefined it. Aronow's influence went beyond the sport. His boats became symbols of speed, luxury, and danger. Even James Bond took notes. Literally, some of his designs were featured in spy thrillers and action blockbusters. Offshore racing had become more than a motorsport. It was culture, style, and sheer velocity, all wrapped in fiberglass and thunder. Loving speed and legend so far? Hit subscribe and ride with us through motorsport's forgotten history. Speed. Raw, relentless, face-ripping speed. That was the heartbeat of offshore powerboat racing. These boats weren't built for the faint of heart. They clocked in at 80, 90, sometimes over 100 miles per hour on choppy, unpredictable open water. That's not like driving fast on a freeway. That's like riding a mechanical bull on a trampoline in the middle of a hurricane with a jet engine strapped to your back. But it wasn't just the speed that hooked people. Offshore racing was a full-blown experience. It was part sport, part rock concert, part high-stakes adrenaline cult. The events were electric. Fans would flood the beaches and docks, leaning over railings with binoculars in one hand and a rum cocktail in the other. The ocean became a stage, and the boats, they were the stars. Boldly painted, brutally fast, and armed with names that sounded like comic book heroes. Miss Geico, Warpath, Victory Team, Cat Killer. And the drivers, they weren't your average sportsmen. These were wild cards and warriors, part stuntman, part strategist. Characters who looked like they stepped out of a Fast and Furious film and straight into a salt spray storm. They lived for the roar of the engine and the rush of defying physics. The sport had its legends. Ben Kramer, whose charisma was only matched by his checkered past. Steve Curtis, one of the most decorated pilots in the sport. And Betty Cook, graceful, gutsy, and the first woman to ever win a world championship in offshore racing. She broke barriers while bouncing off waves at 100 miles per hour. But offshore racing didn't just flirt with danger, it invited it on board. Crashes were inevitable. Fatalities were not uncommon. The sea, after all, has no runoff zones. Still, for fans and drivers alike, it was all part of the thrill. Because in this sport, speed wasn't just a number, it was a way of life. If speed was the soul of offshore powerboat racing, rivalries were its heartbeat. Beneath the glamour, noise, and spray was a world where grudges ran deep, and victories were personal. This wasn't just about beating the clock, it was about beating them. That other team, that other driver, that other builder. Rivalries flared everywhere, between manufacturers, between pilots, and even between marinas. Boats didn't just race, they dueled. The competition was fierce on the water, but even more cutthroat on land. Boat builders like Donzi, Cigarette, Apache, and Fountain weren't just designing for performance, they were designing to humiliate their rivals. If one team debuted a twin-engine monster, another rolled out a triple-engine beast the following season. Hull designs, engine placements, and aerodynamic tweaks became the tools of battle. The arms race was real, and reputations were on the line. Drivers and crews developed long-standing feuds that played out over seasons. One too close pass in a high-stakes heat, that could spark a rivalry that burned for years. Tempers flared dockside after rough races. Rumors of sabotage, whether whispered or wild, added fuel to the fire. Fans got in on the action too. Allegiances were fierce. You were either a Fountain fan or a Cigarette loyalist. Every boat was a banner, every race a reckoning. The outcome didn't just mean podiums, it meant bragging rights for entire coastlines. These rivalries weren't just for show, they pushed teams to innovate, test limits, and take risks. Sometimes it paid off, sometimes it ended in fiberglass confetti and rescue divers, but it always kept the sport crackling with energy. In the world of offshore racing, competition was more than a clock, it was a proving ground. And the rivalries, they were the spark that made every launch, every lap, every finish unforgettable. Offshore powerboat racing didn't just chase trophies, it triggered a full-blown technological arms race. Every team, every builder, every sponsor was locked in an obsessive pursuit of perfection. Faster speeds, sharper hulls, and engines that didn't just purr, they screamed like thunder rolling off the ocean. What started with simple wood and steel construction quickly evolved into a cutting-edge showcase of innovation. Boats were soon being built with carbon fiber composites, aerospace-grade alloys, and even turbine engines pulled straight from military helicopters. Some of these machines could hit over 150 miles per hour in open water, effectively turning the ocean into a drag strip with waves. But progress came at a price, a steep one. Each new innovation meant higher development costs, lighter materials, precision engineering, experimental fuel systems. Nothing came cheap. The race wasn't just on the water anymore, it was also in the accounting books. What began as a battle of speed and skill quietly morphed into a contest of bank accounts and business connections. Suddenly, only a small circle of elite teams, those backed by deep-pocketed sponsors or wealthy privateers, could keep up. The accessibility that once helped offshore racing flourish began to vanish. Up-and-coming teams were priced out. Innovators without funding were sidelined. The sport had unintentionally created its own wall of exclusivity. And with that exclusivity came instability. The thrill was still there, undeniable, unbeatable, but the field grew narrower, the competition more predictable. What used to be a wide-open ocean of opportunity became a polished, high-stakes echo chamber. Yes, offshore racing was still breathtaking, but behind every jaw-dropping finish was a budget that could buy a small mansion, and a logistical team worthy of Formula One. The sport had innovated itself into a corner, where speed reigned supreme, but sustainability was left behind in the wake. Like every thrilling rise, offshore powerboat racing's fall was just as dramatic, only quieter, slower, and wrapped in a tangle of money, risk, and image problems. First, let's talk about the elephant in the engine room. Money. These weren't glorified fishing boats, they were precision-crafted, ocean-chewing machines. Maintaining one top-tier team could cost millions annually. You needed custom hulls, engines that drank jet fuel for breakfast, and a full crew on standby. Add in transport across coasts and countries, and you had yourself a floating money pit. Unless you had a Fortune 500 sponsor, or some very creative accounting, you were sunk before you started. Then came the sport's darker undercurrents. Offshore racing had a serious PR problem. Several big names in the scene weren't just chasing trophies, they were tangled up in less than legal ventures. Most infamously, Don Aronow, the father of modern offshore racing, was gunned down in 1987. The suspected motive? A shady powerboat deal, possibly tied to drug cartels. That kind of tabloid fuel didn't sit well with sponsors or television execs trying to pitch the sport as family-friendly entertainment. Safety was another nail in the hull. Crashes weren't just dramatic, they were deadly. At 100+ miles per hour, a wave in the wrong place was all it took. There's no gravel trap or safety wall at sea, just hard water and harder consequences. Insurance rates skyrocketed, regulations got stricter, and event organizers started backing out. And then there was the ultimate buzzkill. It didn't work on TV. Offshore races took place miles offshore, often out of sight, and definitely out of range for decent camera work. No stands, no clear track, no overhead shots unless you had a helicopter. For fans at home, it was like trying to follow a race with binoculars, through fog, from land. In an age of instant content and highlight reels, the sport just couldn't keep up. Offshore powerboat racing isn't dead, it just moved out of the limelight and into the backwaters of niche sporting culture. Think of it less as a ghost town, more as a quiet beach town with a loyal few still chasing the dream. In the US, the sport is kept afloat by passionate organizers and old-school fans. The Offshore Powerboat Association, OPA, still hosts events, primarily along the East Coast, with races in places like Cocoa Beach, Sarasota, and Michigan City. Race World Offshore, based in Key West, continues to put on high-energy spectacles, especially during the annual Key West World Championship, a weekend that still draws in solid crowds, beach parties, and a hearty dose of nostalgia. The boats? Still loud, still fast, still jaw-droppingly beautiful, but the audience? Smaller, less mainstream. More die-hard fan with a GoPro than ESPN and aerial drone coverage. Teams are often funded by local sponsors or boat-loving entrepreneurs, and fans tend to show up with coolers and lawn chairs, not TV crews and corporate banners. Across the pond, the sport clings to a stronger pulse. Europe still hosts some major events under the Class 1 World Powerboat Championship banner, and the Middle East, particularly the UAE, has stepped up in a big way. Cities like Dubai and Abu Dhabi have embraced offshore racing as part of their sports tourism strategy, offering big money races with even bigger pyrotechnics. Picture this, a boat ripping through crystal clear waters while a jetpack-wearing stuntman flies overhead and fireworks burst behind a luxury hotel skyline. Yet even here, the vibe has shifted. Offshore racing is no longer a global obsession, it's a high-octane subculture. A playground for the passionate few, not the mainstream masses. It's not gone, it's just not what it used to be. Even though offshore powerboat racing has faded from the spotlight, its impact is anything but forgotten. The legacy it carved into marine culture and engineering is still racing strong beneath the surface. Start with the tech. Much of what you see in today's high-performance recreational boats, from the sleek hull contours to twin and even triple outboard engine configurations, can be traced back to offshore competition. These innovations weren't born in boardrooms. They came from the high-stakes experimentation of racers pushing fiberglass to its limits, testing what could slice through chop at 100 miles per hour and still make it to the dock in one piece. The safety cages, impact-absorbing seats, and hull reinforcements we now take for granted. Offshore pioneers developed those on the fly, often through sheer necessity, and more than a few hard landings. But the real heartbeat of offshore's legacy lies in the culture it left behind. From Florida to the Great Lakes, speedboat clubs and enthusiast gatherings still thrive. Poker runs, rallies where participants cruise from marina to marina, drawing cards at each stop, have taken on near mythic status among boating communities. It's less about winning and more about showing off your machine, your crew, and your love for open water velocity. Online, the spirit lives on too. YouTube channels like Offshore Only and Throttle Out serve as digital garages for fans, showcasing restorations, race footage, and deep dives into legendary builds. It's nostalgia, yes, but it's also passion, community, and horsepower-fueled storytelling. Even pop culture hasn't let go. The signature profile of a cigarette boat still shows up in films and music videos. Miami Vice practically canonized offshore racing's aesthetic, and the Fast and Furious franchise continues to borrow heavily from its flashy, fearless vibe. Offshore powerboat racing might no longer be a household name, but its DNA is everywhere. Fast, loud, unapologetic, just like it always was. So what can we learn from the rise and quiet fall of offshore powerboat racing? At its heart, this story is a cautionary tale. It's about chasing extremes, about how a sport built on the pursuit of more speed, more power, more spectacle can eventually outpace its own sustainability. Offshore racing didn't fade because it wasn't thrilling. It faded because it became too much of everything. Too expensive, too dangerous, too hard to follow, and too wild for the mainstream to handle. It's what happens when a sport flies too close to the sun, on wings made of fiberglass, twin turbines, and just a hint of cartel connections. But beyond the caution lies something beautiful. Offshore powerboat racing was also a celebration of human daring, a love letter to innovation, to craftsmanship, to the unshakable belief that limits are meant to be tested and broken. It was for the dreamers who believed that if you could build it fast enough, you could outrun gravity, the tide, and maybe even common sense. It was about the fans too, the ones who showed up year after year, sunburnt and squinting into the horizon, hoping to catch a blur of motion and the echo of thunder across the water. They didn't just watch a sport, they felt it. Yes, the grand era has faded. The podiums are quieter, the headlines fewer, but forgotten? Never. Because the essence of offshore powerboat racing still lingers, in the hum of a high-performance boat skipping across open water, in the mirrored sunglasses of a driver throttling through a narrow channel, in the whisper of salt and engine smoke on a coastal breeze. It's still out there, alive in the roar, in the speed, in the spirit. And every time the bow rises and the throttles open wide, it reminds us: faster, louder, wilder.